My father's fiancée came into our lives 2 years ago, at a time when the pain of losing our mother still lingered like an unhealed wound. My mother had passed away after a long and painful illness. She was the only woman I had ever called Mom, and the only one who ever truly deserved that title in the hearts of both me and my younger sister. We had learned to live without the warmth of her care, endured holidays with an empty chair at the table, and had come to believe that no one could ever come close enough to fill that space. Then she came, Angie. Not loud, not overly sweet. Just a composed, well-dressed woman who spoke politely and made it clear she wasn't here to replace anyone. I used to respect that. And if things had ended there, maybe everything would have stayed peaceful. We all moved in together that January into a house big enough for 6 kids. There was me, my younger sister, and Angie's 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The atmosphere at first was cautious. No one tried too hard to bond. We coexisted like planets orbiting the same sun, occasionally brushing against each other, only to drift apart again. Each of us carried our own baggage, our own pasts, and our own definition of what family meant. To me, Angie was never a mother. She didn't hug me when I was sad. She didn't help me with homework or listen to the anxious thoughts that came with growing up. She didn't take me to the doctor when I had stomach pains for a week from stressing over college exams. My dad did those things. It was always my dad, and I knew exactly where that line was drawn. Who I turned to when I needed advice, a signature, or a simple nod of approval. That's why I never called Angie my stepmom. Not because I hated her, but because she never filled that role in my life. She was my father's fiancée, soon to be his wife, but not my mother. And to me, that was a clear, simple truth. Not an insult, just a fact. But for some reason, Angie seemed to believe that the title stepmother was a necessary part of building this new family. Maybe she thought that if we called her that, her role would feel more legitimate. Maybe she believed that hearing me say mom would make everything feel more real, more acceptable for her. But no one has the right to force a feeling. I can't give someone a title that carries such deep meaning if I don't feel it in my heart. I've always been respectful. I never ignored her. I wasn't rude or disruptive. I just didn't call her stepmom. I didn't think that small omission would bother her enough to hold an actual family meeting where she scolded and lectured all of us kids, myself included, about respect, unity, and the responsibilities of a 2-parent household. But that meeting was the moment everything changed. When she turned to me and started talking about the duties of a child, about our new mother-daughter relationship, and about how I needed to start calling her my stepmother, I realized this wasn't a normal conversation anymore. I had stayed silent for too long. And this time, I couldn't anymore. The family meeting took place on a Saturday afternoon. None of us kids had been told what it was about, but the moment I saw my dad and Angie standing sternly in the living room, like school principals ready to hand out punishments, I had a pretty good idea. And I was right. Angie began with the tone I had come to know all too well. Not loud, but cold and sharp like a knife. We've been living together for over 6 months now, but you children still act like strangers. None of you call me your stepmother, and none of you call him your stepfather. This cannot go on. I glanced at the others. My younger sister had her head down. Angie's youngest son was fidgeting, tapping his fingers against the arm of the chair. Her little daughter, just 12, looked like she was about to cry. But the most striking reaction came from her oldest son, 17 years old, with eyes as cold as steel and a sneer that couldn't hide his contempt. You? Angie turned to him. You have a new father now, and it's time you started acting like it. That begins with respect and listening to your stepfather. I didn't think silence could feel so thick until he answered. Calm, clear, without hesitation. Fuck off, Mom. You can go fuck yourself. That man is nothing to me but the dick you climb on every night. The room froze. I heard my sister gasp. The 12-year-old broke into tears. And my father, he just lowered his head and said nothing. Angie, she stood there stunned. But she didn't lash out. She didn't raise her voice. No shouting. No scolding. She just rolled her eyes and brushed it off like this was somehow normal. Instead, they turned. To me. My father cleared his throat and started talking about how I needed to connect more with the family. But Angie cut him off, almost yelling, "You have two parents now. And if you keep running to your father and ignoring me, this isn't going to work. A family has two adults, and both of us are your parents. I'm your stepmother. You need to start calling me that." I stayed quiet for a few seconds. And then I laughed. Not a mocking laugh, not loud or disruptive, just a short, breathy sound, like my body's natural reaction to the absurdity I had just witnessed. I had just seen her own son curse her out, call my father nothing but the penis in the house, and she didn't even flinch. But me, I hadn't cursed. I hadn't insulted her. I simply refused to call her stepmom, and I was the one getting blasted. I laughed, because if I didn't laugh, I'd scream from how unfair it all was. And that's when everything blew up. "You're laughing in my face?" Angie snapped. "How dare you? This is a serious conversation. You're destroying everything." My father looked at me like I'd just betrayed him. Then he said, "You owe Angie an apology." My fists clenched. My chest burned, but I kept my voice steady. "She's not my mother. She's about to be your wife, and I will respect that. But don't expect me to call her stepmom. And if she doesn't like that, she can leave." Silence. Thick and suffocating. Angie looked at me like I was some rebellious kid tearing the whole house apart. But what she didn't know was, this house was already cracked the moment she walked into it, and chose to ignore the fractures caused by her own son. I thought that after I said those words, "If you don't like it, you can leave," things would settle down. That maybe they'd realize I wasn't being unreasonable, just someone trying to hold on to a little freedom in this house. But no. To them, the issue wasn't about who was right or wrong, it was that I dared to smile. After that day, everything seemed to slip out of orbit. No one cursed, no one screamed, but the air thickened. Dinner turned into these strange silences where the clinking of silverware was louder than any conversation. Angie wouldn't look at me. Dad fumbled awkwardly, trying to start a conversation, but no one responded. I thought they'd forget. But on a Sunday morning, just after I woke up, Angie was already waiting for me at the kitchen table. No coffee, no good morning, just a cold stare and a voice like a school principal addressing a rule breaker. "You need to change your attitude," she said. "We are a family, and I will be your mother, whether you accept it or not. You don't get a choice here." I looked her straight in the eye. "I have a mother. She died 5 years ago. I'm not looking for a replacement." "No one's asking you to replace her," she replied. "But if you refuse to call me stepmother, if you don't act like this is a real family, then you're sabotaging all of our efforts." I swallowed hard, trying to keep the anger down. I wanted to ask her, in that same cold tone she used, what about her son? The one who cursed, insulted her viciously, and humiliated my dad in front of all 6 kids. And yet no one said a word. But me, a girl who never shouted, never disrespected anyone, just because I didn't nod along with their expectations, I became the problem? I didn't say it, because I knew what would happen if I did. Once again, I'd be labeled rude, difficult, disrespectful. In their eyes, I was already branded, and anything I said would only reinforce that label. That night, I went to my room, shut the door, and opened my phone. I typed into my calendar app, 672 days left. I would wait until my 18th birthday, and then I'd leave. No tears, no fights, no goodbyes, just walk away in silence. From that day on, I stopped reacting. Every time they said, "Call her your stepmother," I tuned it out. If they asked what I was thinking, I smiled and said, "Nothing." I chose silence because I realized that sometimes your reaction is exactly what they feed off of to feel powerful. The pain wasn't just that they tried to make me change, it was that I was the only one expected to change. Others could scream, curse, throw tantrums, and still be accepted. But me, I had to play nice just to be tolerated. I no longer expected Angie to understand me. I wasn't even sure my father did anymore. But I knew one thing for sure. If someone truly loves you, they won't ask you to pretend. And me? I was done pretending to be part of a family I was never given the choice to belong to. I used to believe my dad would be the last steady pillar in my life. No matter who Angie was, no matter how angry she got, as long as he understood me, I thought I could endure anything. But slowly, I came to realize something painful. Some goodbyes don't need words. A prolonged silence is more than enough to know you've been left behind. After that confrontation, my father didn't yell at me anymore. He didn't raise his voice, but he also didn't stand up for me. Every time Angie repeated her demand, "Call me stepmom," he just stayed silent. Once, during dinner, she confronted me again. I looked him in the eyes, hoping, praying he would say something, defend me, explain things, or at least give me a look that said he understood. But no, he just dropped his gaze and kept eating. I don't know what changed him. Maybe he loved Angie so blindly he couldn't see what was happening. Maybe he thought he was keeping peace in the house. Or maybe, and this hurts the most, maybe he truly believed I was just a stubborn, selfish kid who refused to adapt. Meanwhile, Angie kept pushing the boundaries. She started interfering with the smallest things. She told me I had to ask her, not my dad, if I needed school papers signed. She left sticky notes on my bedroom door about a new curfew. She even raised her voice when I got home 10 minutes late. When I explained my dad had always allowed it, she shrugged and said, "There are 2 parents now. One opinion isn't enough anymore." I can't pinpoint the exact moment the house stopped feeling like home, but the longer I stayed there, the more I felt like an uninvited guest. Every step I took felt watched. Every word I said was dissected. Even when I laughed, even just laughing with my little sister, Angie would glance over with suspicion in her eyes. I don't know what the other kids thought. Angie's eldest son kept that same defiant look, like he was immune to every rule in the house. He didn't curse like he did that day, but the contempt in his eyes never left. The 2 younger ones kept their distance. And my little sister, the only person who still felt like family, even she started pulling back. She didn't talk to me as much. Maybe she was afraid that if she stayed close, she'd get dragged into this too. I didn't blame her. I didn't blame anyone. I just felt empty. In the days that followed, I started building a new shell for myself. I came to my room earlier, spoke less at dinner, silenced my phone whenever I was home. I wore headphones even when I wasn't listening to music, just so everyone knew I didn't want to be bothered. I learned how to disappear inside my own house. Adults love to say home is where you belong. But for me, every step back into that house felt like walking into a storm. When I had no tools to survive. No armor, no shelter, no allies. I had only one thing, the will to survive until the day I was finally free. And so, every night before bed, I'd stare at the countdown app on my phone. That number wasn't just days passing, it became my goal, my comfort, my silent promise to myself, you'll get out of here. You'll live a life where no one can ever force you to call a stranger mom. I used to hope that silence would make everything go away, that if I didn't react, didn't fight back, didn't rebel, they would eventually let go of this forced stepmother-stepchild fantasy. But they didn't. To them, my silence wasn't peace. It was confirmation, a sign that I was the one who needed to be fixed. I lost count of how many times Angie repeated the same line. You need to learn to respect your elders. She'd say it with that condescending tone, her eyes sharp like a disciplinarian from some old-school movie. What exhausted me the most wasn't her words. It was the nod of agreement from my dad, the one person I used to believe I could lean on. He doesn't feel like a dad anymore. Now he's just a man who lives in the same house, always siding with the louder voice just to keep the peace. To him, I'm no longer the kid who held his hand at Mom's funeral, who sat beside him on tearful nights missing her. I've become a problem, a thorn in the throat of this new family that refuses to go down. One afternoon, I came home early. I accidentally overheard Angie talking to him in the kitchen. She's ruining everything. If you can't control her, I will. Even my own kids know how to show respect better than she does. I don't know what my dad said back. I didn't have the strength to stand there any longer. I turned away, went up to my room, locked the door, and sat in silence for hours. Every sound seemed to fall into an abyss. I didn't feel hurt anymore. just cold. That day, I stopped waiting for acceptance. I no longer hoped to be understood. I no longer waited for them to change. I started preparing my mind like someone getting ready for a long, long trip. I drew a hard line between myself and the world they had built. I stopped playing the family game. No more dinners at the same table. No more cheerful weekends. I lived like a shadow, present only in my own space. Whenever they reminded me, "You should call her stepmom," I simply nodded, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. I learned how to exist without leaving footprints. And deep down, I knew. I was counting down, not because I hated them, but because I knew. Every effort in this house was a performance, and I no longer wanted to play a role. Their hypocrisy had never been clearer. Angie's son could curse, insult, and still be forgiven. Me? I smiled and became the target of blame. I never disrespected anyone. I never raised my voice. All I did was refuse to play a part that didn't belong to me. And now they say I'm the one in the wrong. So I ask, because sometimes pain demands to be spoken. Am I wrong? For not calling that woman stepmom? For not blending into a family stitched together by expectations no one truly wants to live in? For choosing to smile instead of scream? For walking away instead of staying and losing myself? If that's wrong, then let me be wrong. All the way until the day I'm old enough to write my own definition of family. I'm not telling this story to ask for pity. I'm telling it because I know there are others out there like me, forced to call someone family just because they live under the same roof. I'm speaking to those who've been expected to love on command, who've been judged for not being friendly enough, not soft enough, not willing to blend in. Because sometimes what you need isn't a new family. It's a safe space to be yourself. A place where you're not assigned a role, not compared to others, not expected to bow your head just to keep the peace. If you're silently counting down the days to your freedom, I want you to know you're not selfish. You're just being real. And if you had to choose between living in a fake family or living alone with your dignity intact, then I know you and we'd make the same choice. That's where the story ends. If it touched you in any way, please leave a comment, like, share, or subscribe to our channel. It means the world to us and gives us the strength to keep making more videos like this. Thank you for listening. Take care and see you in the next one.